Welcome, listener, in the shadows. We bring stories into the light. Join me as we explore the encounters no one speaks of and the things that watch from the dark. You were never supposed to see this, but since you have, you might as well wear it. From the vaults of the shadows, a new collection of unsettling apparel and artifacts pulled straight from the stories that were never meant to surface. Soft, worn-in shirts and hoodies that feel like something you dug out of a locked trunk in an abandoned ranger station. This isn't just merch, it's evidence. Bloodlines in the Mist, Chapter 1. Return and Unearthing, Day 1, Arrival at the farm. The first thing Jesse noticed was the silence. It wasn't just the absence of human noise. It was as if the entire world had paused, waiting, watching. The old gravel driveway lay beneath a thick blanket of fog, each rock a crisp crunch under the tires, echoing unnervingly in the still air. Trees loomed like silent sentinels, their skeletal branches disappearing into the swirling mist that crept low along the ground like spilled smoke. As Jesse stepped out of the car, the cold bit deep through their thin jacket, dampness seeping into their skin. The scent of earth after rain mixed with a faint, musky odor, something animalistic yet intangible. Their boots pressed into soggy leaves scattered across the lawn, each step sending soft whispers of decay curling into the mist. The farmhouse emerged slowly from the fog, its peeling paint and warped wooden planks stained by decades of storms, shadows pooling beneath the eaves like dark stains. The windows stared blankly like tired eyes, reflecting little but the dim grey of dawn. The porch sagged under the weight of years, floorboards creaking under Jesse's hesitant steps. The door resisted slightly, a reluctant groan echoing through the stillness as it swung open. Inside, the air was stale and heavy, thick with the smell of old wood, dust, and something faintly metallic, like dried blood or rusted iron. The house felt alive, breathing slowly beneath the layers of neglect. Sunlight filtered weakly through grime-coated windows, casting mottled patterns on threadbare rugs and cracked plaster. Jesse's fingers brushed the peeling wallpaper as they ascended the narrow staircase, each step releasing a sigh from the old wood. The attic was a sanctuary of shadows and forgotten things, packed with relics of the past layered in dust. The air was cooler here, and the silence stretched thick as Jesse's eyes found the old trunk nestled in a corner. Fingers trembling, Jesse pried open the rusted clasps. A rush of stale air, scented of mold and forgotten memories, spilled out. Inside lay brittle, yellowed journals stacked beneath faded sepia photographs. Faces half forgotten, smiles frozen in time. Beneath them, a collection of strange objects. Claws curved like sickles, jagged teeth polished to unnatural sharpness, and small wooden figures carved with unsettling precision. The journals bore spidery handwriting, hurried and uneven. One entry stood out, dated decades ago, speaking of a pact beneath the blood moon and warnings about the beast within, written with growing desperation. The words twisted into madness near the end, spiraling with cryptic phrases and urgent pleas that seemed to claw at the edges of sanity. A sudden draft stirred the attic, rattling loose papers and sending a chill crawling up Jesse's spine. From somewhere deep in the surrounding woods came a distant howl, low and mournful, echoing across the mist like a summons. Day 2, lingering eyes. The morning fog lingered stubbornly, seeping into every crevice of the farm. Jesse stepped outside, the dampness clinging to their clothes as if the mist itself sought to tether them here. The world beyond the farmhouse seemed swallowed in grey trees faded into a blur of shapes, their trunks like shadowed pillars, the forest a breathing, shifting entity just beyond sight. Each step across the damp earth was measured and deliberate, the snap and crunch of dead leaves underfoot startling in the unnatural quiet. The air was thick with the scent of wet moss, decaying wood, and an undercurrent of something wild and predatory. Jesse's gaze flicked constantly, catching movement at the edges of vision, shapes that dissolved when stared at directly. The feeling of being watched was suffocating. At the border where the forest swallowed the fields, they found enormous paw prints pressed deep into the mud, unmistakably animal, yet impossibly large. The prints showed signs of dragging, claw marks gouged into the earth and bark, a violent signature. The farm's silence seemed to stretch taut, ready to snap. Every distant rustle of branches or bird call made Jesse's heart jerk in their chest. Shadows pooled beneath trees, where the mist thickened and the line between solid ground and shifting air blurred. That night, Jesse's dreams were invaded by glowing eyes and whispered voices echoing from the shadows. They ran through endless forests under moonlight, pursued by a faceless, lupin presence. The voices called their name with a tone both loving and cruel, promising release and destruction. Day 3, the house breathes. Jesse woke gasping. Their bodies sprawled awkwardly on the cold wooden floor, the ache in their muscles unfamiliar and raw. Their skin felt hypersensitive, as if new nerves had awakened overnight. When they caught their reflection in the cracked mirror, a cold jolt seized them. Those eyes, once human, shimmered faintly gold. Their features seemed sharpened, their jawline taut with something feral. The house itself seemed to pulse with life. Floorboards creaked under invisible weight, and distant walls sighed like breath expelled in exhaustion or warning. Shadows twisted unnaturally in corners, thickening like ink spilled on fabric. The ambient silence became a presence, an oppressive watcher that refused to be ignored. Every small sound, the drip of water from a leaky faucet, the scuttle of a mouse, felt amplified. Jesse found themselves jumping at creaks and gusts that could be explained, but the feeling of being stalked grew unbearable. The mist outside seemed to press against the windows, trying to seep inside. Day 4, blackouts and shadows. From the moment Jesse woke, something felt fractured, as if the world itself was splitting in half, and they were the seams strained beyond repair. They opened their eyes to the grey light filtering through the grimy window, but the room was unfamiliar. Dust motes swirled like tiny ghosts, and the wooden floorboards pressed cold and uneven beneath their skin. Memories from the previous night were shards, scattered and incomplete. How had they ended up lying on the ground of the barn, dirt clinging to scraped skin? Why were their clothes torn, ripped in places that made no sense? A vague sensation of hunger gnawed beneath their ribs, sharp and unrelenting. The mirror in the hallway became a harbinger of terror. When Jesse glanced up, their reflection hesitated like a flickering film reel. For a heart-stopping moment, the image warped, eyes glowing faint gold, teeth sharpened into unnatural points. Then just as suddenly, the glass snapped back to normal. Jesse stumbled back, chest pounding, palms slick with sweat. A primal restlessness seized them throughout the day. The forest outside called with a siren's voice, whispers slipping beneath the rustling leaves, shadows pressing against the window panes. At times, Jesse caught movement in the mist, a flicker of fur, an indistinct shape that melted away when confronted. Their heartbeat quickened to a thunderous rhythm, an echo of something deeper awakening inside. That night was a fractured dreamscape, a fevered labyrinth where Jesse wandered endless woods under a pallid moon. A lupin silhouette followed silently, eyes twin orbs of amber fire burning into their soul. The whispers returned, soft, urgent, half-crooned lullabies twisted into threats. "Come home, we're waiting." The dream collapsed as the howl of a distant beast shattered the silence, dragging Jesse awake to the cold, suffocating stillness of the farmhouse. Day 5, isolation and descent. The days folded into one another like pages torn from a weathered book, each marked by growing distance and disconnection. Jesse's presence in town was no longer that of a returning child, but of a specter. Someone whispered about behind closed doors, eyes averted in suspicion. Walking down the cracked sidewalk, Jesse felt invisible yet exposed, as if every secret dread was etched across their face in broad strokes. Familiar faces, neighbors, old friends from childhood, blurred into masks of wary judgment. Conversations faltered, voices dipped into hushed tones when Jesse approached. At the farmhouse, the isolation was physical and spiritual. The mist seemed to seep through walls, thickening the air until it was hard to breathe. The house groaned with its own ancient pain, and every creak echoed through the hollow rooms like a warning. Jesse felt the curse tightening its grip. Hunger flared with unnatural intensity, a gnawing ache that no food could satisfy. The mirror revealed changes too subtle for others to see but horrifying to Jesse. eyes brightening with wild ferocity, nails lengthening into curved claws, skin tingling with restless energy. At night, the dreams darkened. No longer mere shadows and whispers. They became vivid excursions into the wild, running on four limbs beneath oppressive trees, sensing prey and predator with terrifying clarity. Jessie awoke soaked in sweat, heart racing with both terror and a strange exhilaration. Each dawn brought new scars, raw and unexplained, raked lines across their arms, deep enough to sting, yet no memory of how they'd gotten there. Day 6, the Elder's warning. A sudden knock shattered the eerie silence. Jessie hesitated at the door before opening it to reveal an elderly woman, her eyes sharp and knowing beneath a heavy woolen shawl. She carried the weight of the land in her bones, and her presence brought an uncanny gravity to the farmhouse. Her voice was low and steady as she spoke, weaving a tapestry of dark family history. The curse was no myth, no mere superstition. It was a bloodline bound in shadow, a pact forged under the blood moon generations ago. She spoke of ancestors who'd been consumed or controlled the beast within, of rituals designed to bind and contain, but always at a cost. The family was marked, their fates intertwined with something ancient and ravenous. Jessie listened, the words sinking deep and stirring the core of dread they'd long tried to suppress. The Elder's eyes held a warning. Control was possible, but it demanded sacrifice. The beast's hunger would never fully abate, and to resist was to wage a lonely, endless war. As the woman left, the farm seemed to exhale, the oppressive air momentarily thinning, but leaving behind a hollow silence filled with the weight of inevitability. Day 7, unraveling, and the beast within Jessie's sanity frayed like worn fabric under a relentless storm. The boundary between self and other began to dissolve in unbearable ways. Sounds twisted. The creak of a floorboard became the snap of a bone. The whisper of wind transformed into sinister murmurs lurking just beyond hearing. The mirror became a portal to an ever-changing reflection, sometimes human, sometimes monstrous. Jessie's eyes would flash with feral light, teeth elongate in moments of anger or hunger. Their voice cracked as guttural growls clawed up from their throat, uncontrollable yet oddly primal and liberating. Isolation deepened into desperation. Friends were distant memories. Even the local townsfolk, wary and superstitious, recoiled from the invisible taint that clung to Jessie. Inside the farmhouse, shadows lengthened and warped, seeming to pulse with a dark life of their own. Visions flickered in the corners of Jessie's vision, faces from the past, trapped and twisted by the same curse, their eyes pleading for release or revenge. The curse was no longer a distant legacy. It was flesh and bone, blood and breath, an inescapable storm raging within. And as the blood moon approached, Jessie understood with chilling clarity that the night ahead would demand a reckoning, to accept the beast or attempt to sever the ties that bound them at an unimaginable cost. Chapter 2, Awakening the Curse, Day 8, First Full Moon, First Shift. The night air was heavy, soaked with mist that slithered like smoke between the skeletal branches. Jessie stood outside, staring up at the blood moon hanging low and swollen over the farm. Its crimson light washed everything in a surreal, unsettling glow. Trees seemed to lean in closer, the shadows lengthening into fingers reaching for flesh and bone. That night, Jessie felt the first true surge of the curse's power. Muscles twitched beneath skin as if some wild force pulsed just beneath the surface, yearning to break free. A strange warmth spread through their limbs, hot and sharp like molten metal. Their senses sharpened. The world exploded with unbearable clarity. The scent of wet earth, the faintest rustle of a mouse in the field, the acrid tang of iron in the air. They stumbled back inside, breath coming ragged and shallow, heart thundering like a trapped animal's. Their hands trembled, nails digging into palms as a terrible awareness dawned. Something was changing irreversibly. Sleep was a battleground of violent, surreal dreams, running on all fours through an endless forest, chased by glowing eyes and echoes of long-dead ancestors howling from the darkness. The boundary between dream and waking blurred until Jessie awoke gasping, covered in a cold sweat, their body twitching uncontrollably. Day 9. The craving and the hunt, morning brought no relief. Hunger gnawed with a ferocity that no meal could quell. It wasn't just food Jesse wanted. It was something rawer, deeper, something that whispered to their bones in a language older than words. Every shadow seemed alive, every distant howl a summons. When Jesse stepped outside, the farm transformed into a hunting ground. The once familiar woods now bristled with menace, the mist curling and shifting like living smoke. They tried to resist, but the animal inside clawed its way forward. Jesse caught themselves growling under their breath, eyes darting nervously at every sound. When a rabbit darted across the field, something primal stirred, a surge of adrenaline and instinct that was both terrifying and intoxicating. By nightfall, Jesse was pacing the edges of the property, senses alert to every movement. The line between hunter and hunted blurred as the curse deepened its roots, warping their mind with instinctive urges. Day 10, the reflection darkens, isolation tightened its grip. Jesse avoided the mirror, afraid to confront the truth that was slowly bleeding through their skin. But when forced to look, horror met them in the glass. The reflection was a moving nightmare. Eyes flickering with feral yellow light, lips pulled back to reveal sharpened teeth. The image shifted and blurred like a nightmare flickering on the edge of consciousness. In the quiet moments, Jesse would catch themselves baring claws, fingertips roughening into calloused points. Their voice, once steady and familiar, now cracked with guttural snarls when emotions surged. Even their breathing changed, ragged, uneven, punctuated by growls that slipped through clenched teeth. Day 11, the local elder returns. The mysterious elder returned as dusk bled into night, her silhouette framed by the red moonlight. She carried a worn leather satchel filled with herbs, talismans, and a small, ancient knife, tools for rituals meant to bind and soothe the beast's hunger. Her voice was grave, but calm as she instructed Jesse in the old ways, chants in a forgotten tongue, protective symbols drawn with trembling hands. But even as she spoke, Jesse sensed the futility beneath the ceremony. The curse was a living thing, ancient and hungry, and it could not be caged without cost. The elder's eyes, sharp as a hawk's, softened for a brief moment. "You are not alone," she said, "but this path is yours to walk. Control the beast or be consumed by it." Day 12, dreams become reality. The boundary between nightmare and waking life dissolved completely. Jesse's dreams began to invade the daylight hours. They saw fleeting glimpses of lupin eyes in every shadow, heard whispered calls carried on the wind. The air around them thickened with dread and anticipation. One afternoon, while exploring the far edge of the property, Jesse found huge, deep paw prints pressed into the damp earth, larger than any wolf, too perfect to be anything else. Their blood ran cold. At night, the howl escaped their lips, an anguished, primal sound that echoed across the misty fields and fractured their very soul. The beast was rising, and Jesse could no longer deny that it was becoming one with them. Day 13, the fracture widens. Morning broke cold and grey, the mist clinging stubbornly to the fields like a living shroud. Jesse awoke with a splitting headache, a throbbing echo of last night's howl still vibrating deep in their chest. The house felt heavier now, oppressive, as if the walls themselves bore witness to the growing darkness inside them. Their reflection in the cracked bathroom mirror was no longer a subtle distortion. The eyes stared back with a feral glow, the edges of the face stretched ever so slightly, lips thin and tight like a predator's snarl waiting to erupt. Their hands bore new scars, scratch marks, some fresh, others fading like ancient runes burned into flesh. How had they gotten them? The memories were missing, lost in the fog of blackouts and fevered confusion. Every sound was amplified, the creak of floorboards, the distant crowing of a rooster, the rustle of dry leaves outside, set Jesse's nerves on edge. The line between reality and nightmare thinned, leaving them trapped in a waking dream where the world felt both alien and hostile. Day 14, whispers in the woods. Compelled by a force beyond reason, Jesse found themselves drawn toward the edge of the forest at dusk. The mist lay thick like a blanket, damp and cold against their skin. Every step crushed brittle leaves and twigs, sharp and loud in the heavy silence. From deep within the trees came faint whispers, soft, unintelligible, yet laced with urgent warning. The voice sounded ancient, echoing from shadows long forgotten. It felt both a call and a curse. Jesse's heartbeat thundered in their ears as they ventured farther in, senses ablaze. They caught fleeting glimpses of movement, shadows shifting between trunks, a flash of yellow eyes watching from the darkness. The air grew colder, the whispers louder, until they were no longer just heard but felt, vibrating inside the bones, a chilling hymn sung by the forest itself. When Jesse finally stumbled back to the farmhouse, the sun was long gone, swallowed by the gathering mist. Their limbs trembled, not just from the cold, but from the knowledge that something was waiting for them in the woods, a presence as old and relentless as the bloodline that cursed them. Day 15, the unseen wound. The hours stretched like thin ice ready to crack. Jesse's body was no longer entirely their own. Muscles ached with unfamiliar strength, joints moved with unnatural fluidity, and the skin prickled with constant, maddening itchiness. But beneath the surface, something darker stirred. A wound appeared on their left forearm, deep and ragged, as if clawed by something with sharp talons. The pain was sharp but oddly distant, as though the injury belonged to someone else. No memory accompanied the wound, no recollection of how it came to be. Fear and fascination warred inside Jesse's chest. Was this proof that the beast was breaking through, or was it a sign that they were losing themselves entirely? At night, the dreams returned, now more vivid and terrifying. They ran through forests soaked in blood moonlight, chased by shadowy figures and ancestral howls that promised salvation and damnation in the same breath. Day 16. The warning. A knock came at the door late in the evening, jolting Jesse from a restless sleep. Standing on the porch was the local elder, her face pale and lined, eyes heavy with warning. "You're running out of time," she said softly, voice carrying the weight of generations. "The blood moon wanes, but the curse will not. You must decide, fight it, or surrender to the beast." She handed Jesse an old, tattered journal, the last writings of a relative who had walked this path before, vanished into the night long ago. The pages were filled with desperate scrawls, cryptic rituals, and a haunting final line. "Only by embracing the darkness can the light survive." The mist curled at Jesse's feet as the elder disappeared into the night, leaving a silence that felt heavier than stone. Jesse stood alone on the porch, the journal clutched tightly, heart pounding with a mixture of dread and dark hope. The beast within was no longer just a shadow, it was becoming their reality. Chapter 3. Confronting the Legacy. Day 17. The Hidden Chamber. Jesse's sleep was fitful, haunted by howling echoes and half-glimpsed figures in the fog. The next morning, they began searching the farmhouse with a feverish urgency, drawn to the creaking floorboards and shadowed corners they'd long ignored. Behind a loose panel in the basement, Jesse discovered a narrow stone staircase descending into cold, damp darkness. The air was thick with the smell of earth and old smoke, as if the chamber had been sealed for decades, forgotten by time, but not by the family. Torches flickered as they stepped down into a vaulted room lined with crude symbols carved into the stone walls. Wolf heads, blood moons, interlocking chains. At the center was a crude altar, stained dark and scattered bones that spoke of ancient rites both sacred and profane. Among the relics lay a brittle leather-bound journal, worn by age. Jesse's fingers trembled as they opened it, revealing the desperate handwriting of an ancestor who'd chosen a path they feared to follow. A letter describing the choice to embrace the beast rather than be consumed by it. Day 18. War within. The knowledge weighed heavily on Jesse's mind as the sun fought through misty morning light. The ritual chamber had shifted something deep inside, a resonance, an echo from the past stirring the curse. The physical transformations accelerated, muscles tightening, senses sharpening, and the beast's hunger gnawing at their will. At times, Jesse felt the primal urge surge, claws itching to tear, teeth bared in silent snarls. Their reflection was a battleground. Human features flickered with lupin distortion, elongated shadows in their eyes, twitching lips revealing sharp canines. Each mirror was a confrontation, each glance a reminder of the monster growing beneath the skin. Jesse grappled with despair and a flicker of forbidden power, torn between fighting the darkness or succumbing to it. Day 19. Blood moon rising. Night fell cold and heavy as the blood moon rose, casting a crimson glow over the mist-shrouded farm. The forest seemed to breathe with ancient life, whispers growing louder, calling Jesse deeper into the shadows. Clutching the ancestors' journal, Jesse prepared the ritual described in the brittle pages, a dangerous act meant to sever the curse's hold or bind it in uneasy truce. The ceremony was a dance of firelight and shadow, chanting old words that felt both foreign and instinctive. Visions engulfed Jesse, ghostly figures of wolfish ancestors trapped in eternal torment, their howls ringing across time and space. The very ground trembled beneath the weight of the legacy, a clash of wills echoing in the night. Day 20, between two worlds. As dawn fractured the horizon, Jesse stood alone in the clearing, drenched in sweat and stained with earth and ash. Their body was caught between two forms, human and beast, neither fully one nor the other. A howl tore from their throat, raw and aching, blending with the rising wind. The mist curled around them like a cloak, obscuring where Jesse ended and the creature began. The farm, the forest, the curse, they were all entwined now, an unbreakable bond woven through blood and shadow. Jesse's choice lingered in the silent morning air: accept the darkness and wield it, or fight for the flickering light within. The story ends here, the howl fading into the mist, a promise of struggle yet to come. You made it back for now, but the things in the dark never truly leave, do they? They watch, they wait, and perhaps they remember you now too. If you want to hear more, if you dare to listen again, step back into the shadows. Like the video, subscribe, but know this: some doors once opened do not close so easily.